Hello, this is TRJ Audio. I am the guy responsible for all the sounds in Deep Rock Galactic. That means all the screams, all the weird creature sounds, and recording voice lines, and all of that stuff. I also produce and mix and master the soundtrack. And I'll be going through the soundtrack that I received from the composer, and then I'll compare it to my finished version after I've done producing and mixing on it. And I'll be walking you through the different processes I went through. And just a quick disclaimer before we start. I'm doing this in my own spare time, and it's not something that's being paid by Ghost Ship Games or anything. So if you feel like supporting me, and if you want to see more videos like this in the future, then feel free to like and subscribe. And also there's a link for Buy Me a Pizza. And I also have sound packs for sale for Unreal Engine, which is the game engine that Deep Rock Galactic is being created in. You can follow the link to have a look at those. So for the general aesthetics and the general vibe of the soundtrack, Mikkel, the game director, very early on in the process, talked about The Thing and John Carpenter movies. He envisioned like this very dark 80s synthesizer-driven soundtrack. And since I'm a complete synth freak already, this seemed like a very good match. I've been building my own synthesizers and modifying synthesizers and repairing synthesizers since I was 18 probably. So that was right up my alley. And I didn't really have to do that much research about that era because I knew it beforehand. But I did have to research a bit into John Carpenter stuff, revisit that, and try to incorporate some of the same sounds. And that resulted in a mix of Minimoog-ish sounds and early Roland synthesizer sounds. Also some Solina string machine sounds that you'll get introduced to later on in the video. Volume 1, which this soundtrack is from, almost only consists of emulations of synthesizers. That is, virtual plugins that are running in a music production software suite. And that way I can dig out old sounds without breaking the bank. But during Volume 2, I started to do more hardware-based stuff and got into more real hardware effects and synthesizers. And I personally like Volume 2 more than Volume 1, even though they're both amazing, of course. You can definitely hear a slightly different vibe in Volume 2, and that is a lot because working with real hands-on instruments is just a different feel. It's more creative. So this is the version that I received from the composer, and let's have a listen to that, and then along the way I'll tell you how I think it could be made even more awesome. There's definitely a cool brooding, eerie tension going on right here. A way to make it even more awesome would be to have the whole track be a bit more 80s. Make it so that it has an easily identifiable 80s sound to it. Also add a bit more punch to the drums. And just a little more dirt and growl and bass and evilness to the overall track. Not really sure if evilness is a real word, but now it is. And it could be a bit more action-packed. You know, it should be the soundtrack for a fight with lots of aliens and stuff. And it could also need some variation in the sounds being played, because it's a little bit repetitive right now. And this part is definitely my favorite part of the track. It's really cool what Sophus did. He went from the more high-pitched synthesizer stuff to much more bassy stuff going on, which creates a nice contrast. But I think it's missing some badassiness, some growl and some heavy bass stuff going on right here. also it's just missing the feeling of, you know, the whole track taking off right in this section. Yeah, and that drum break right there could definitely be more punchy. And that's pretty much the track. We're back to where we started, melody-wise. So just to sum up on what I received here and how I think it could be massaged a little bit better. Definitely more punch to the drums. Definitely a more 80s vibe going on with the drum sounds and reverb, and also the choice of synthesizer sounds. It's a little bit too mellow and hypnotic. So let's go on to my version, the final version. So first things first, we have the tension sound. Then there's a bass coming in. And there are some parameters right here that I turn up and down along the way to create some variation in the sounds. Then we have a different synthesizer coming in. Yeah, and just right now you can tell that the bass sounds are more powerful. The drums more punchy and distorted a little bit, and there's just more growl to the whole thing if we compare to this. Then back to my version. It has its own kind of more of a signature sound to it. And if you listen to the snare sound, you can hear it getting thinner and thinner because I'm filtering it out to create space for the strings and also to create tension right here. And if you listen to the bass synthesizer sounds, you can hear that they change in sound all the time slowly, getting more aggressive. And then I added a new line where it goes up from top to bottom right now. And as you'll notice, I added a completely new melody line, a synth lead sound, compared to this, where that melody or hook line is missing completely. And back to my version. Yeah, and that hook line is doing wonders for the track. It really sucks you in and it gives it a whole new level. This is really where the track takes off. And then right here I'm doing the same thing as earlier. I have a repetitive synth pattern going on, but I'm filtering it, treating it in different ways. Notes are getting shorter and shorter and more muffled over time, just to create some movement and variation. So let's have a look at the different tracks or the different sections. So this is the drum section. Let's just have a listen to that solo. You can see some automation going on in the yellow line, going from 0 and then up, which is a filter on the drum, becoming less and less muffled. And then the whole beat kicks in. You can hear that there is kind of a room to the sound. The tom-toms are panned out, the drums are pretty punchy. Let's have a look at the tom-toms alone. Pretty basic stuff, not too much going on, but they just keep a nice busy vibe to the whole thing. There's the instrument itself. And the other tom-tom. And that is combined into one track with some saturation on it, some subtle saturation. You can hear bypass and non-bypass. Oh, let's go back a bit. Listen again. Bypassed. Gives it a certain grunge and edge, a little bit of distortion. And then the equalizer, which cleans up the low end a lot. And also gives it a sparkle in the top end, so you really hear the beats. Then it's rooted into a reverb. No reverb. And then let's go on to the kick. Very basic stuff, because that's the 80s aesthetics. And some equalizing, cleaning up some frequencies. And then there's a sub-harmonic generator. Then onto the snare. Very basic stuff as well, with some top-end sheen on it. And the other snare, which isn't a snare, but that's a hand clap, with some top-end sparkle added. And then it has a wide stereo field in contrast to the other snare sound, which is very mono. And all of the drum tracks combined. I have an equalizer, cleaning up the low end, adding some top sheen again. And then another thing that cleans up the low end completely, dynamically over time. This is the place where the tension strings come in. Just to clean up the drums, it leaves room for the strings to come in. We have an epic boom sound. Comes once in a while during the track to really mark that a new section is coming. Also, you can hear the synthesizers always evolving in sound. So that was the drum section pretty much, and then let's go through each synthesizer section. This is a weird instrument that makes the metallic intro sound, which I pretty much left as is. This is the original. Then with the effect on, gives it a much more lo-fi, old school sound, because that is definitely a part of the aesthetics that I'm going for. This does some filtering as well over time. And then I have some delay going on. This was very much inspired by the Alien movie. The soundtrack has a very cool delay element going on. Let's go on to the strings. This is the instrument that's playing them. Basic synthesizer sound. Then through some tape distortion again. It just rounds off the top end and makes it a bit warbly. And a lot of EQing going on to clean up the low end and make this sound less boxy. And then some dynamic filtering again. the reverb on. Oh, I guess it's not sending in reverb. My mistake. Yeah, then it's filtering out. Let's go on to the next section, the Arpeggiator. This is the instrument that is used. And then as you can see, there's some stuff going on with some knobs being automated to make it sound more evolving. The original track was a bit too repetitive, so a way to change that without actually changing the instrument is just to do automation. Then add some tape, distortion and warble. You can definitely hear it warbling. Sounds like the sound is drifting up and down in pitch. And then a compressor, which we will talk about in a second. And then you can hear a line that I added. Goes from the bottom to the top just to create that release in the drop. And then the hook line that I added. You can really hear the tape warble going on. Sounds like an old baked cassette that's been in your Walkman in the sun. Very, very basic stuff, but really works. And then back. And then we have another instrument. Which stays pretty much the same. There's no modulation going on of different parameters. And that does absolutely nothing except cutting out the tiniest high end, which doesn't matter at all. This one is a compressor which is being triggered by a kick drum. You can hear it over here. When it goes down red, it means that the track is being reduced in volume. You can hear it here to create a pumping effect. And then on to the next track. That's just a weird sound that goes in between the two different sections. And then a hand clap that comes in without, with, and let's go on to the next track that's playing the hook line, because we just heard one of the tracks. We'll go on to the next one. This is the one you just heard, and then the next one. Just an octave down, a very stupid sounding synthesizer, but a very 80s sounding synthesizer. And then another track, the PBG 360, one of the first wavetable synthesizers ever built. Really cool sounding and very 80s sounding. And also very stupid sounding. And then combined. Sounds very 80s and very cassette-like. And then on to the next track, which is that weird metal instrument again. Highly filtered. And really awkward sounding drum sounds. This is from a Lindrum, one of the first drum machines ever built also. Very 80s sounding. And then this pretty deep, bassy sounding synthesizer that I really like the sound of. Cleaning up the low end. putting some high end on it as well. And then reverb. And then the next section is some strings. There are 2 layers of strings, but these ones I'll solo. So this is a very old school sound. It's an old string machine emulation. Sounds really cool and very retro. Yeah, this is it right here. It's called a Solina string machine. And then I have an EQ that cuts out the bottom end. And then this basic synthesizer, which is a software clone of the Juno 60, which is an awesome analog synthesizer. It just plays a fast melody line. Mute it. Put it on again. It's subtle, but it definitely drives the track onward. And then on to my master track effects. Which are just keeping basic levels for the track. So it won't go super loud all of a sudden or super quiet. And then I usually master the whole thing afterwards, once I have all the different soundtracks ready. Now all of this looks pretty easy and straightforward, but it's doing so much work beforehand that doesn't work, that doesn't sound cool, that doesn't mix well, that doesn't really sit well with the listener. All that stuff thrown aside then leads up to this. So that is pretty much it for now. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you feel like it, you can always buy me a pizza. And also if you need sound effects or music composed for your projects, then feel free to reach out. As I mentioned before, you can go on and have a look at the sound packs that I have for sale on the Epic Marketplace if you're doing your own computer games in Unreal Engine, which Deep Rock Galactic is made in. And a big shout out to Sophus, of course, the composer. And thanks a lot for watching. See you!